There's a storm across the valley. The clouds are rolling in. The afternoon is heavy on your shoulders. There's a truck out on the 4-lane, a mile or more away. The whining of his wheels just makes it colder.
Welcome to Community Forum. My name is Priscilla Almquist-Olsen, your host. Today is April 4th, 2022, and we are in the studio. COVID is passing us by, and we're so delighted to have in-person interviews. And today we welcome and are honored to have two of our select board members of Easton who are running for re-election. Dottie Fulginiti, Chair, and Marc Lamb, Member. So welcome, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to be here, Priscilla. Thanks so much for letting us join you this morning.
You're welcome, and it is early for me. That's what she meant. But that's good because we have the rest of the day. And you, I know, have busy lives and are working, so appreciate that you came. Now, you're running, tell us a little bit about yourselves. Marc, we'll start with you.
Sure. So my name's Marc Lamb. I grew up in Easton. I grew up in South Easton on Cranberry Lane. And I, born and raised, went to Oliver Ames. That's actually where I met my wife. We started dating in high school. She graduated a year behind me, or a year ahead of me rather. And from there, we stayed together. We bought our first house in Rainham, actually, and we were there for just a few years. And then Easton sucked us back in. So we live in the community. We live downtown, and we have two kids. My son is 12, Thomas, and my daughter Mallory is 9. They go to the middle school in RO. And back in 2013 or 14 is when I started getting involved in Easton, in community service in Easton. And I joined the finance committee. I was actually appointed first, and then after 9 months I was elected, and then from there, like the rest is history. I just got the bug and never looked back.
Well, that's wonderful. And being on the finance committee certainly prepared you for one of the biggest challenges, the budget.
Yes.
And how to distribute the tax revenue.
Absolutely. So I can't appreciate enough the finance committee, and that's, to this day, I look at people on the finance committee. I don't think people really appreciate the body of knowledge that they have and the appreciation for the budget that they have. A lot of times you hear throughout town that there's concern about spending our budgets, and once you start to really peel into things on the finance committee, you learn things that you did not know, and it gives you a different perspective, and you start to see things, and you can really appreciate all the hard work. A lot of people don't understand how lean the town runs. So the town, we run exceptionally lean. People don't understand that fully, and we do a lot of great things with what we have. And that absolutely prepared me to run for select board 3 years ago. It was interesting when I was talking to Jamie Stebbins and Jen Stacy when they were running. And I called them and I was talking to them, and they said, I don't know if I'm ready for that. I'm like, you have no idea what you know. Because they were on the finance committee for years. So you don't really, you're so prepared for this that you don't know it until you get there. But being on the finance committee was an incredible preparation, because on the finance committee you're in touch with every other committee as well. You work with the select board, you work with the town administrator, you work with the assistant town administrator. You see what's going on in the budget subcommittee, and everybody on that committee has a responsibility towards another committee, and they bring it to the table, and then they share it. So you're getting educated on every committee in town, all the budgets in town, all the people who make things happen in this town. So my appreciation for the finance committee is obviously quite large.
And it certainly prepared you. But I also think that being a townie,
Mm-hmm.
like me, also is shows that you have a real investment in the town that you love and that you grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
So that gives you an edge on your dedication and devotion to your job.
Absolutely. So one of the things, I am a townie. I was born and raised in Easton, brought from the hospital right to my house in Easton, which is, as us townies know, that's what makes you a townie. It's funny, but it's true, and we laugh, but that's how it goes. But my brother and sister, they lived in Brockton before they moved here. So I'm the only townie in my family, which is actually really funny, but it also is true. But I married into a family where my mother-in-law was born and raised in Easton, graduated from Oliver Ames in the 60s, and my father-in-law as well. And my wife's grandparents lived here. So I hear all ends of the spectrum, because you know how you have the older people in town often talk about, well, back in the day when things were, I hear that all the time. It's like, it's my family that's saying that. But I'm also, young enough where I have a younger group of people that I say younger, but 40s or 30s or even 50s, where they want to see some new things. And I can genuinely appreciate both sides of that. A lot of times people they point to these two groups like butting heads, and I genuinely see both sides, and I say, listen, you got to make this work here. People who, I was talking to the Lions Club one time. I was giving a speech on economic development, and I said, in the year 2020, it's not like Easton was in 1970. I'm sure you can appreciate that. And then, the Lions Club, it's a little bit of an older crowd. You hear you're darn right it's not. And then I said, just like in 1920, it wasn't the same as 1970. Then it gets a little bit quieter. And I said, like in 1920, it wasn't like it was in 1870. Then it gets really quiet. Then the perspective hits. I'm like, oh, things do change. And it's your ability to adapt through those changes, which is really important. And that's what we're trying to do.
Well, that's wonderful. Now, Dottie, you have been on the board for 9 years. And I can remember 9 years ago when I was your campaign manager, and you won a magnificent score. It was huge, wasn't it? And it's so hard for me to believe that 9 years have gone by.
It has gone by quickly. So I've lived in town for 28 years, although I'm not a townie. I did grow up right next door in Stoughton, and so a townie light maybe. But I've loved Easton as my home for all of this time. My husband and I moved here because we wanted to live in this, beautiful community and raise a family here. So right now, my son is 24 years old. He serves in the U.S. Navy as a nuclear engineer, and he's living down in Virginia right now. And my daughter is graduating college, which I can't even believe where the time has gone. So for the people with young families, I say this, appreciate every minute, because it really does fly by. I remember the first year campaigning that my kids were out little holding signs, and it's a really nice family event. So, it's a lot of work, but from my day job, I work with Old Colony Planning Council, which is the regional planning agency for the area. And I'm the economic recovery planner. So that gives me a lot of access to information to be able to help businesses, grants, municipal information, and it works really well with this elected position. So very happy to work there. And I've been really delighted for the past 9 years to work on this board and serve with people like Marc, and there's been some really wonderful contributors over that period of time. And looking forward, hopefully, to another 3-year term.
Yeah, well, your experience is gold, isn't it? It's worth gold. Because maybe Marc can talk about this too, and you also. There is a learning curve, isn't there? There's a period of time when you have to learn the job, but both of you now have served. And you've passed the learning curve many times, Dottie, but you have too. So tell me, what do you think has been one of the major accomplishments, Dottie, that you have forged in your service on the board?
Well, This might seem a little bit not like the biggest thing, but to me the biggest thing is to work with a board that really can support each other, show each other's talents. Each one of the board members, I think, should have an area that they really want to champion. You know, Marc's is economic development. He's doing a great job. Jamie is on the green communities. Jen Stacy's on affordable housing. Craig Barger really cares about state politics and policies and is our real great liaison to our legislative delegation. And when each of us can do something that makes us, you know, passionate about what we do, it raises all of us. And we work together and we support each other. We genuinely like each other. And, you know, that doesn't mean that we don't necessarily disagree, but we really hope to get those ideas to a place where we can have a consensus and move forward. And I think it makes the process a lot better when we not only speak with each other, but when we hear from the community to hear what they really want and make sure that the decisions that we make that are going to really influence what happens in the community over the next 10, 20, 30 years, they're made with a lot of contribution from people. So having that communication, I think, is really important. And I really think that, you know, all of the little increments that we've made along the way, advancing housing that's affordable to people that want to live here, and most recently, the age-friendly work that we've done, we embarked with AARP and the World Health Organization to come up with an age-friendly action plan. And we put together a group of people that was very diverse with very different backgrounds and perspectives. And we came up with the first action plan for the next several years. And it was really a great process. And it really helped us look back and explore the policy decisions that we make on the select board. How does that translate to the people that actually live in this community from their age continuum? So when Marc talks about young families and older families and people that want to live here and downsize and there's no place to go, we're working on tackling those challenges and coming up with solutions for that.
Wonderful, wonderful. So Marc, how about you? What do you, as you look back, what do you think was the greatest accomplishment?
Well, the past 3 years have been interesting to say the least. What I expected going into it was not a pandemic, was not going into survival mode. I remember I think it was less than a year I was on when the pandemic hit, and it was, we were looking down the barrel of a financial crisis when we didn't know what the outcomes were going to be. But we knew that we had to take swift action and make hard decisions. And there was a number of people that we weren't able to rehire or they were gone through attrition. And there was departments were combined to streamline things. That was really difficult, but we knew we needed to do it for the next year and the next year. We didn't know where state aid would be. We had no clue. So going through those tough decisions put us in a really good financial position. And you'd be surprised to hear that we're in a good financial position in some regards. You know, by the things that we can control, we have put ourselves in a really good financial position, which 3 years ago, if you told me that, it would be hard to believe that. So that was initially, but also going through all this, and despite all of that, the economic strides that we've made. So in the past 3 years, 2 sewer districts have gone online. And people hear sewer districts, great, you have sewer in these areas, towns. What that means is it's now become a better, bigger, stronger economic zone that opens the door for business, commercial, residential, combination to come in, to develop in those areas. And when you're developing in those areas, what that does is that financially allows you to preserve the areas that keep Easton Easton. And that's the balance which people, I try to convey to people is, you know, if you want that preserved open space, the beautiful idyllic Easton that we have, you want that, great, I want it too. But that comes at a cost. So you have to build up these zones to financially support those. And in these 3 years, we've done a lot of that. And we've brought the business community together through Easton Outside and Discover Easton. And we've not only brought the business community together and supporting each other, now we have an open door where the lines of communication between our business community, the Chamber of Commerce, and economic development and Mike Blanchard and Connor and Dottie and myself is incredible. So I think in 3 years, we managed financially exceptionally well, and we built upon areas to support the future of Easton, and we brought the business community together and into the town of Easton to strengthen the relationship. So,
Dottie, you know, one of my concerns has always been the fact that the tax rate has been the same for residential dwellers as well as the business owners. And in towns surrounding us, like Foxborough and Mansfield, which have a lot of business, the difference between the residential tax rate and the business is substantial. And therefore what's happened is that people's taxes don't continue to rise every year. So when do you think that's going to be a possibility?
That's a great question, and we get asked that question a lot. Generally, that tax shift happens when the amount of business in your community is around 20%. And we've been hovering at 10% or less for years now. So we're not close to that yet. But as Marc said, you know, bringing in the sewer and being able to have new business come in, that's going to help us, you know, really get to those numbers. I think that the industrial park is another place that we're looking at because it seems to be underutilized, and we're looking at how to make some improvements to the infrastructure in that park as well. But when we, you know, start to have more business, you know, back in the 70s when the state was rolling out sewer infrastructure to all of these rural communities, Easton didn't want to do it because they didn't want to have that much business. They wanted to really keep it as a rural area. And I think that, you know, the decisions that were made before us and the decisions we're making are all in line with trying to keep that rural characteristic of the town. But what that does is it puts the whole tax burden on the taxpayers or the people that own homes here. And so we do need to balance that with having the right amount of business in the right places, the right kinds of business for our community. And that's what we're working on now. We've done a strategic plan for the Queesit area, which is right next to Stonehill. So we're hoping that, you know, students that leave Stonehill stop taking a left to go to Brockton, to go to Panera and, you know, all the shops up there. And we want them to take a right and walk down to our Queesit area. So we're trying to come up with strategies to attract new businesses there that the college, you know, the students in the college and the people that work there will take advantage of. And in the Five Corners, we've already seen, Marc can go into a little bit more about new businesses that started even in the pandemic in that area because we have sewer now. So
that makes such
we're
a big
looking
difference.
forward to that.
Right. What about, is there another area, a third area that you feel would be suitable for new sewer?
there are 3 areas. So you have downtown, Queesit,
Right.
and Five Corners.
Sorry.
And I think that those areas were chosen because they were existing economic zones. So why create an entirely new economic zone? Build upon what you already have. So now that the infrastructure is in there, it's time to backfill it with business, with residential, with commercial, with split, with mixed use. But now is the time, and I think I get frustrated the most out of anyone. At the speed at which things happen. But I also know that it takes decades to do. You mentioned earlier the split tax rate and how not having a split tax rate puts all the burden on the residents. And when Easton decided in the 70s to not have the state pay for 90% of sewer, other towns did. Foxborough, Mansfield, you mentioned them all. And when they made that decision, they were still a single-rate community, like we are. It took decades of creating an infrastructure, having business enjoy the infrastructure, then move into a split tax rate and alleviate that concern on the residents. We just put 2 online in the past 3 years. Our first one went online 10 years ago, about that. So we're far away from that split tax rate through no fault of anyone's. It takes, that infrastructure has to be in place to build up that business, to move towards that split tax.
Well, I think, Dottie, your day job fits right into this because you're advising people on economic recovery. And that's what you're talking about, Marc, is we need to place businesses in there, non-industrial businesses, like an insurance company's corporate office would be lovely. because it doesn't, a corporate office doesn't have children, you know. They would go in the schools so that we would continue to have a tax burden. And speaking of schools, we have one elementary school that's going online. How is that going?
It's going outstanding. The project is, I think, ahead of schedule and under budget. We're not there yet, but everything is going very well. I don't see any. I'm actually touring it tomorrow and looking forward to it. And that's an absolute necessity. That was a really good decision on behalf of the community to move forward with that. Had we not moved forward with that, we would have left on the table tens of millions of dollars and been left with 3 schools that are well past their prime.
What Marc's referring to is the state money that comes from, what's it called?
Mass School Building Authority.
Yeah, Massachusetts School Building Authority Fund, yeah. So when do you think they'll come online, Dottie?
Well, we're hoping that the school will be completed by the end of this calendar year, and the optimistic view of that would be if the school's completed before the holidays, over the break, we could move everything in, and the children would start in the second part of next year. But with any construction project, you know, nothing is paved in stone on that just yet. That's what we're hoping for. But, you know, I'll tell you, as we've both been on the school planning committee, you were on it before I was, and the amount of detail that goes into planning a school is just incredible. I mean, they really look at every single little piece of fixture and color and texture and the way the academic programs would flow. And, you know, the children, when they walk into their classroom, will have things on the wall that they can be interactive with, and even the energy of that school. There's going to be ways that the children can see through a glass window what the inner workings of the HVAC. I mean, it's really, this is just going to be such a wonderful opportunity for the young people in our community. And when you talk about school-age children, we're actually down school enrollment over the years. People are having less children, so we're really hoping to, we've built the school with a little bit of extra capacity, and you know, that's what Easton's all about, is families and people that start off, they come here to start their family, they live here, they want to stay here, and that's all going to start with a love of education from an early age in pre-K through grade 2. So I'm thrilled that the taxpayers in this town saw that was a real value, even if you don't have children in those lower grades anymore, like me. I know that it's going to be a great impact to my property values, and it's just really the foundation for any community. You ask any realtor out there, what is the first thing people care about when they're looking to move to a new community? And it's the schools. Having a strong school system says a lot about the values of the people that live in your town.
Well, I think it was a decision that taxpayers made based on, you know, what was cost effective, because to retrofit the 3 school buildings would have cost more than building the new one, so, or something like that. So, I mean, it didn't make any sense. And the fact that you can incorporate all the technology also into the building, as well as these teaching tools that you mentioned. It's wonderful. So kids are really getting so much more than I did when I was in school.
It's all relative, right?
It really is, yeah.
I mean, back when those schools were built, all they needed was books, bookshelves, a library, and chalkboards.
Right.
Not all they needed, but I mean, you get the idea. Today, it's light years ahead of that. How could you possibly retrofit a school that was built in the 50s to support that? And why would you spend money to redo a school that's not designed for that when you can build something new? I mean, that school, when I was listening to the details about it, to me it struck me as it's almost like the Museum of Science coupled with an early educational institution, where you walk in and there's glass walls and you can see the inner workings of this or that. It's an experience as you go through. That to me is like the Museum of Science, but it's also where these kids will be educated, which is amazing.
So it's a combination of the Museum of Science and the Children's Museum.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that's
these
great.
young students are our future leaders, and they're the ones that are going to be making the big changes, and they're going to be having to compete in a global society, which is something that, we hear more talk of, and it's becoming more, as we get technology, a lot of us do business with people all over the world, and we can do it very easily on a video camera now. So I think that global competitiveness is really important.
Absolutely. So what's your vision for the future? Are there any specials?
Ooh, that is a good question. I wish you asked me that before. I could have slept on that. That's a really good question. Vision for the future is to have 3 economic zones that are built up. It's a great combination of mixed use, of commercial, of residential, of business, where people will drive to, park their cars, get out, walk around. I'd like to see tourism downtown, and I would like all those areas built up and supporting the sewers that we've put in place, so that it can support the rest of Easton. Because I want the preservation of Easton is equally as important. You can't have one without the other. So I want those areas built up to support what we do have.
So that we
It's
can have a
balanced.
split tax rate.
Yeah. Split tax might take 10 years or 20 years, but that is the goal. I mean, yeah,
Right.
if you have enough business in town and you can move to that, absolutely. But right now, we can't do that. We don't have enough businesses in town. And if you do split the tax rate now, those businesses are, the attraction's now gone. Why? They're not going to move here because now they have a higher tax rate. Right now, it's attractive to them. So you got to patiently wait.
So I assume you're pitching Easton to all kinds of businesses to attract them to come here.
Yes, that's the hardest thing for me on economic development is, and what people don't realize is, if you have downtown or Queesit or wherever area in town, they say, well, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? Well, every parcel is privately owned. The town doesn't own anything down there. So you need a business owner or land owner or developer who owns those parcels wanting to develop it. If they don't want to develop it, it won't be developed. And oftentimes the town gets blamed for that. And it drives me nuts because I want nothing more than to see these areas developed. But I don't own them. The town doesn't own them. A developer owns them, or an individual owns them, or a corporation owns them. And you can't make them do anything. You can only ask or try to work with them. So it's frustrating to say the least.
How about you, Dottie?
Well, I just want to comment on what you said, because the takeaway I heard from that is that you're planning to stick around for 10 or 20 more years to lead the Economic Development Council. So that's great news, people.
I'm trying. We'll see.
So what I really want to see is, for us to continue to balance what we're doing. The age-friendly work to me shows that we really need to ensure that we have more support and services for our older people. They've really invested their life in making this a wonderful community and paving the pathway for the younger families. And I think some of the things that we've done over the years with, Marc really led, Marc and Tom Broussard, former select person, led the charge on tax relief program for seniors that people in the community can contribute to. And we have a really great group of people on that committee that are looking for distributing those funds to people that need it. We did help people during the pandemic with rent and mortgage relief. So I think we always have to be looking at everything we do with how is this going to impact our older people and how can we keep them in the community. My dream would be to have, I don't want to call it a senior center, but I would an all ages center, a community center that our older people can still get the great programming that they get now, but have a bigger, more accessible place to do that. Now, I don't have any plans for that, but it is in my mind when we're thinking about what we're looking at in the future. And we also have recognized the need when we did the Dorr and Whittier study several years back about the conditions of our buildings. Not only did we discover, well, we knew, but it underscored the fact that we needed a new primary through grade 2 school. But moving those schools opened the door for opportunities on those sites. So we also, our police, fire, and DPW are well beyond their useful life. There's aspects of it that can't be improved by additions or enhancements. And we have a study going on right now to see what are our next steps for those buildings as well. So that type of development is going to be really important.
Sure. I mean, that would be your first concern, would be to utilize those buildings for other town agencies. But in the end, you may actually sell them and get some income.
We could, and that's all going to be part of the feasibility study on what makes sense for those sites. So I'm looking forward to that.
I like the idea of a community center. I mean, I love the Frothingham Hall, but it's limited, and it's just for senior citizens, basically. Although I understand that other groups can come in there if they want to and use the facility. But there's also the synergy between age groups that's very important. You know, we see in nursing homes, kids come in and dogs come in, and how all of that interrelationship is important, and it gives people, especially the older people, reason to live and to look forward to something. So I think the interaction among different age groups is good. You know, a big community center would be great.
Well, I was at a conference a couple of years back, and I met this woman that worked for an organization, and she was telling me about they were matching the older people in the community with the honor students at their high school, and they were bringing them in to show them how to use iPads and technology. So immediately I said, oh, wow, that's great. I have to go back and tell Easton. And she said, oh, you're from Easton. That's one of the schools we've been working with. We were out there last week. So these things are all going on all the time. And, you know, I wasn't even aware of that. But, you know, some of the things that we found out during the pandemic is the social isolation for some of the people in our community was really just devastating. And the Council on Aging and the Health and Human Services, they did some really interesting programs. One of them was for people to sign up to volunteer to make phone calls, to check on people. And then other people to take those calls that wanted to be checked up on. And I think, you know, it was great throughout the pandemic, and I think that even going on in the future, sometimes people just need that one phone call a day just to have that connection with someone. And I've been told that a lot of relationships have continued outside of that program. So
yeah, it's called the Friendly Caller Program.
Right. Well, you know that.
I do, because I'm one of the callers.
That's great.
Yeah. I wanted to mention that I understand that 38% of our land is in conservation, and that's an incredible number, and that is due to the surcharge, the 3% surcharge, and that's a wonderful outcome from our tax money. 38%. I mean, how many communities can say that, and how many communities wish? When Marc was talking about how the old days, a lot of the communities that are now built up were farm communities in the old day, and now they're looking at concrete buildings, cars, pollution. It's just a shame, and we have avoided that because of this conservation relief. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that Connor Reed is such a leader and contributor to making this town run smoothly, hardworking, creative, and so forth. And in conclusion, why don't we give some comments about that?
Sure. Marc, do you want to start?
About Connor? Where do you begin with Connor? Connor he's an absolute leader in the state. It's interesting. Anytime he's part of a state-level group, he seems to rise to the top and be listened to the most. I don't know where we would be without Connor. The way he manages the finances, how he runs his departments, his department heads, the respect he has between them, and I mean, he's brilliant, and we're very lucky to have him.
Yeah.
I would say, you know, I worked with Connor for most of the time that I've been on the board in whatever position he was in at the time, and I've really gotten a chance to watch him grow into the position that he's in now. And when we hired him for the permanent position, there was some people that, you know, weren't really sure that he was the right person to do the job. And I always knew in my heart that he was, because I did work with him, and I know that he really cares about the people in the community. And when we have the conversations offline about, you know, kicking around an idea for the future, it always stems back to how is this going to benefit the people in the community as a whole? And we all look at things like that. So it's a really good fit with the way the board thinks. My concern is that there's a lot of older town administrators that are retiring, and there's not a lot of younger people going into those fields. And that's really a shame, because it's a great, you know, it's a lot of work, a lot of stress, a lot of responsibility, but they're great jobs. And as many of the town administrators and town managers retire, their eyes are looking for new candidates. So I want to keep it so that Connor loves his job, loves to be here, loves to work with the community, because he's definitely somebody who's a rock star across the state. Everybody knows who he is. And, you know, people stay in those jobs because they feel appreciated. And I think that he does feel that from the community. And, you know, he really is a great asset.
He surely is. And I remember the one thing that people said, but he's so young. He's so young. But he is brilliant, as Marc said. He is just amazing. And he learned a lot from David Holden.
Yeah.
Yeah, David Holden, who mentored him and took him under his wings. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. And oh, one last thing, you have no opposition. So why is it important for people to come to the polls on April 23rd, which is a Saturday, so there are no excuses, 10 to 4 at the Oliver Ames High School? Why is that important? People say, oh, there's no opposition, why should I come?
So there's a couple of things that I'll say. One is that it's really important to let your elected officials know that you really support what they're doing. We need the feedback from the community to know, are we going in the right direction? You know, do people think we're doing a good job? And usually when things are going really well, people can tend to be a little bit apathetic, or they say, well, it's a Saturday, it's the Saturday at the end of April vacation. You know, I might not be able to make it, you know, so I would say make sure you get an absentee ballot, because you really should vote. And the other thing is, I'll say this is a little self-serving, and Marc, I'm sure you'll agree with me, the select board members, you know, and the school committee members and the finance committee members, everybody that's elected, we work really hard, and this is a volunteer position essentially. And we put in a lot of hours on top of a day job, on top of young families, or on top of caring for older family members. It's really going to hurt my feelings if nobody comes out to vote for us. So, you know, I want to hear people come out. We've gotten a lot of comments and feedback through this election process from people really thanking us for our work. We get cards and notes all throughout the year, especially during the pandemic. You know, people raving about what Marc has done with economic development and the businesses, and the leadership that we've shown through COVID and keeping the community safe. And we hope people will recognize that and show that recognition by coming out to vote.
Marc, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, it's, you know, not coming out to vote, I'd like to see support, and I'd like to see who does not support and why. I think there's a responsibility to the people at home, to the voters in town. You know, you have an opportunity to share your voice, whether it's approval or disapproval, and I think you should take that. I think that's really important, not just for us, but for everyone else in town.
And there are contested races,
yes.
The school committee, for example. Yeah.
Yep, and I think that's probably what's going to get people to the polls most. So.
Well, one of the things that disturbs me, and I'm concerned about, is that when fewer people come out to vote, there's always the chance of a write-in campaign. And that should really worry the average taxpayer, because then, you know, it's a wild card, and people can win on a write-in if the population of voters is very small. So that is one of the big reasons that I'll be there. I don't want anybody to come on a write-in and have a silent campaign to unseat these two very accomplished and dedicated servants of the public, Dottie Fulginiti, Marc Lamb. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is Priscilla, Almquist-Olsen, Community Forum. Until next time, be well.